Guys, wait until you hear who my guest is today. This is my ultimate fangirl moment. Today, I have Dr. Neil Nathan, MD, on my show. And you don't understand, I've been reading his books for years, and I can't believe he's coming to my show. He has been practicing for over 50 years, and he is the ultimate source of all things when it comes to mold. His ebook is called Mold and Mycotoxins, Current Evaluations and Treatment. But his best-selling book, the one he's really known for, is called Toxic. And these books have helped thousands of people heal. He really just deals with the most complex patients who are dealing with mold. His newest book, The Sensitive Patient's Healing Guide, is just out now. So if you ever thought you had mold or wanted to know more about mold, you really have to hear this episode and you have to learn from this man. He is a gem. So here we go. Hi.
There we go. Hi.
Dr. Nathan, I cannot believe you're on this show. I'm so excited. I am one of your number one fans because I think there's a lot of number one fans out there.
Thank you. No pressure.
Thank you so much for being here. So I know we're going to talk about mold. There's no question we're going to talk about mold. I already put like our intro about mold, but I want to, if you don't mind, this is something I really don't know about you. And I want the audience to know about you because our podcast is called Medical Disruptors. And you are definitely one of the top medical disruptors in this country. I don't know, does that title resonate for you?
Well, I've been called lots of things.
Okay, so we're saying it's not one of the worst things you've been called, so that's okay.
Oh, I've been called so much worse. You have no idea.
Okay, so medical disruptor, you'll take it. So I want to know a little bit about you. Like what, you were practicing medicine at some point, and then at some point you decided to go into this, right? You didn't come out of med school talking about mold, right?
Nobody did.
So tell me a little bit about where you were before becoming the mold guru and what brought you into this crazy world.
So basically, how did a nice boy like you get into a place like this? I think that story starts with, before I went to medical school, I always wanted to be a healer. And I thought naively that if I went to medical school, they'd teach me to be a healer. And I was very disappointed that they were going to teach me to be a medical technician, a good one, but it wasn't what I wanted out of that experience. I went to a very good medical school, University of Chicago, did well, but I would constantly ask my professors for what I thought was something missing in my education. I wasn't sure what it was. The only one who even vaguely pointed me in that direction was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was on faculty. And she taught me how to be with people and how to talk to people in a very human way. So I left medical school just feeling I'm going to have to learn a whole lot more to be what I want to be or get what I'm going to get out of this. So I did not have a language back then. This was a long time ago. I didn't have a language for what were we missing. I would now say we were missing the psychological, spiritual, and energetic components of what goes into healing. So I spent the entire rest of my life learning about how to do that. And I studied with almost anybody who had something interesting to teach. I wasted quite a bit of money on people who promised certain informations and did not deliver. And I had some phenomenal experiences with some fabulous people who were the real deal and really did know about healing. I added, within a short time of leaving medical school, I studied hypnosis, osteopathic manipulation, particularly cranial work, homeopathy, all kinds of injections and structural things that I learned how to do. As time evolved, our understanding of biochemistry became much greater, and we dug into that. And so it's this complex learning where I constantly was adding something to my healing tool bag so that I could help people who I was not otherwise able to help. So I just came to the table wanting to help every human being who came into my office. And
Wow.
I don't know any of us could say we've done that. I know I can say I tried. So I just learned a whole lot about a whole lot of stuff. And my interest in what people would now call outliers, which would be, I was interested in helping people that my colleagues didn't know what to do with.
Yeah.
Forced me to keep learning, to keep studying, to keep asking questions about what am I missing in this patient? What do I need to learn? What do I need to learn from them? What do they need to learn in order to help them optimally? So that's a kind of a long-winded way of telling you how I got where I am.
It's a really unique perspective because a lot of providers that I talk to, myself included, it sounds like you went into med school already open and waiting for more. And I think a lot of us go in thinking, oh, this is it. We learned the thing. We have all the tools. And then once we go out in the world, then we're like, wait, I really can't answer questions. Or we have a personal medical situation that then we suddenly realize the limitations of conventional medicine. And then we make the switch. But with you, it sounds like you came in already and you were already disappointed to begin with. This is a great algorithm. Thank you for teaching me the algorithm for pathology. But like, how do I actually heal people? So that's very interesting. You're the first person that I've spoken to that just had this from the beginning and just went on this journey. So was there a time when you had a practice and you were just practicing conventional medicine, or were you always like from the beginning doing more?
I first learned hypnosis in medical school. They didn't really teach me how to use it, but I began to use it as soon as I got out of medical school. With each skill I learned, I was able to apply that to some patients I hadn't been able to help before. I just have a lifelong passion for helping people and learning and putting all the bigger pieces together and figuring this stuff out. For me, it's been a fabulous lifelong journey.
It's amazing. So how did you become the mold guru? How did
Oh,
mold
I
come
become
to
the mold guru. Yes,
You're the mold guru.
I know. My mother would be so proud.
Father.
That story starts in the mid-'80s when because of all of my interest, I got into treating chronic pain. I had a whole lot of skills, so I became head of a chronic pain unit at a large hospital. And we began to see in the early 80s a weird condition where people hurt all over, didn't get any sleep, they were fatigued, and we called it fibrositis. We now call it fibromyalgia.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a very odd presentation in that when medicine first runs into things like this and we don't understand it, the first thing that happens is the psychiatrists label it, it's all in your head, because nobody has all of that. But I was seeing a lot of these patients because I was running a pain clinic, and it was really obvious to me that it was not in their head. We slowly began to understand that there were multiple biochemical pathways by which people got chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, and we learned how to treat it very effectively. Early on, working with Jacob Teitelbaum, he and I really were on the same page, sharing what we were learning and realizing we could help a lot of those patients. As we began to help a lot of those patients, I began to run into even more complicated patients. But I realized after a while that many of them had Lyme disease. And if I treated their Lyme disease, I could help them. Then by around 2005, we stumbled into mold toxicity. And honestly, the way that happened was a patient who had mold toxicity came into my office, put Dr. Shoemaker's book on my desk, and said, read this. I said, great, I love to read. I'll get to it in a couple of months. She said, you don't understand. I'm paying for this office visit. Read it. Yeah.
Wow.
I said, great. I get paid to read. This is so cool. Fortunately, in the fairly beginning of that book, Mold Warriors by Richie Shoemaker,
I've read
he
it.
laid out something that he called the biotoxin pathway. which was a brilliant understanding of the biochemical complexities that underlie a lot of inflammatory illness. And so I literally read that, said, I get it. So I literally, with her in the office, called his office and said, hi, you don't know me. My name is Neil Nathan, but I want to come and study with you.
That is amazing.
And Richie, I have done this my whole life. And Richie said, who are you and why do you want to come study with me? I said, I just read your biotoxin pathway and I think it's brilliant and I want to learn about it. He said, okay. So next weekend I was on a plane to Pocomoke, Maryland, and just started studying with Richie and realized that mold toxicity was another huge piece of the puzzle for a lot of patients. I worked with Dr. Shoemaker very closely for a number of years, but we diverged in terms of how he perceived it and how I perceived it. I thought he had a limited vision of what mold toxicity was. He was not embracing the newer tests that we were all developing, like when the urine mycotoxin test came out. He flat out said he didn't believe it and would never run one. But
Wow.
to my knowledge, never has. So we just began to look at mold toxicity through different eyes. I didn't think his approach was as comprehensive as it needed to be. It wasn't including a lot of the new information we were getting. And so I began working with people who were more like-minded to me. Began working with Joe Brewer, an infectious disease specialist from Kansas City. And we began to put together our grasp of what this was and how to work with it. So that's how I got here.
And now I know it's more than mold. I know I'm oversimplifying by calling you the mold guru, but you are my mold guru because I turn to you and I hit a wall my patients. And I'm so grateful to have you as a resource. Okay. So thanks for telling us how you became a medical disruptor. It sounds you were a medical disruptor from the very beginning. It was automatic.
My professors at medical school did not know what to do with me. Some thought I was the greatest thing since sliced bread and should be put up on a pedestal. And some thought I was a disruptor or a bad influence. I should be drummed out of medical school.
Such a bad influence.
I'm told by friends of mine who were at my grading sessions as a medical student that people really got mad at each other about how they perceived me to be.
Wow. So you were a medical school disruptor.
I was one of those students who basically would ask constantly, why do we do that way? And people would say, oh, because we do. And I'd go, well, the money to go to medical school. I don't want, it's because we always did it that way. What is the medical evidence for this is a good way to do it? This gives us good results. And people didn't like my asking.
They didn't
Some
like
people
that.
loved my asking those questions, and some people resented my asking those questions, which was just be a good medical student and suck it up. Work 100 hours a week and just get your degree and get out of here. And I went,
No way.
sorry.
Wow.
If you don't know the answer to a question, that's fine.
That's okay.
Let's keep asking those questions until we understand the answers.
Wow. So let me ask you this question now. Why is it that conventional medicine doesn't recognize mold toxicity as a thing?
It has to do with the progress of scientific information. And this goes across all sciences, medicine just being one of them, which is it takes at least 20 years for a new idea to be accepted in medicine, or maybe takes 2 generations, sometimes longer. Doctors do not embrace new information, which I find fascinating, but they don't.
They don't.
New technology, new drugs, there's a huge economic driving force for, yes, let's get that into our system as soon as possible. New ideas, not so much. And so we can use Lyme disease as a model for mold toxicity, which is about 15 years behind Lyme in terms of its acceptance, which is those of us who worked in the field knew that there was a thing called Lyme disease and had ways of treating it, but the medical profession denied it and said there is no such thing as Lyme disease or chronic Lyme disease. Yes, there is something we called post-Lyme syndrome, but
Not
that's not
chronic.
really chronic
That's not
Lyme
really
disease.
chronic.
And so there was a huge delay in physicians accepting the fact that there are hundreds of thousands of patients every year with Lyme disease. The CDC finally, in 2013, acknowledged that there were 300,000 new cases of Lyme every year. An epidemic greater than AIDS ever even came close to being. As of last year, they've accepted that it is now 625,000 new cases of Lyme disease every year. Despite that, Lyme is still very slowly integrating into medical consciousness. It's just,
Yeah.
I lived in certain states where the infectious disease specialist said, we don't have Lyme disease here. And I would read the monthly report from the state health department, which listed X number of people with documented Lyme disease. And I'm going, the infectious disease people keep saying it isn't here. And yet I have patients with it here. The state health department recognizes it. So you're looking at a denial process that goes on. Forgive me, I think there's a laziness to it, which is when people leave medical student, they want to go, I've just worked my tail off for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
I won't learn anything new for the rest of my life. And so I hope that this will hold me through the rest of my life.
Yeah.
The irony is, in every medical school that I know, on the first day of class, everyone gets a lecture saying, what we teach you today is going to be 50% wrong in 20 years. Now, I took that to mean that I was going to have to keep studying if I could figure out which 50% are we getting right. My colleagues took it to mean, I hope and pray I can get through my practice career without having to figure out what it is I didn't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think there is a certain, because I'm writing my first book, by the way, is called It's Not in Your Head, to your point about it's in your head. I'm writing my second book now about medical gaslighting, and what I'm putting forth, because I'm trying to explain to patients also not to get so mad with their providers, because I don't think there's malice there. But to your point, you say laziness. I think there's a certain amount of hubris or arrogance around that their tool is the only valid tool. It certainly has validity, but it's not the only valid tool. And they've created that this is the gold standard, and anything else, even labeling it as alternative, already makes it less than. So I think just
in their mind.
In their mind, of course, in their mind, thank you for that distinction. In their mind, it makes it less than. But sometimes I also lecture to other providers, and I say, you may not understand everything we're saying, but the only ask I have of other providers is just add us to your list of referrals. Just say, I'm not sure what's going on. I don't think it's in your head. Go see Dr. Nathan. Go see Dr. E. Go see someone who maybe they can, like, if we could just be added to the list of referrals, I think the patients would be in such a better place. But it's just like this refusal to see that it even exists. It's such a disservice to the patients who then have to find us through word of mouth, through the internet.
That is how it is. I agree with you. I think it's an intellectual laziness. Now, I'm weird, and I don't want to impose my style on anyone. My ideal Saturday morning was to snuggle up with books and papers and read. That, to me, was fun. And my wife took her years to realize other people don't do that. That's not normal. When one aspect of physicians is we do have egos. Sometimes they're validated and sometimes they're not. But if we don't know something about any subject that we're asked, there is a tendency to get into that hubris of, I don't know about it, that is not worth knowing. And I can't known to you how many physicians have said, if what you were teaching, and this doesn't hold just for mold toxicity, mold, Lyme, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, autism, I might have worked in a lot of fields here, chronic pain. If what you're saying is true, they would have taught it to me in medical school, was a constant refrain. And I'm going, wait a minute, I graduated from medical school 50 years ago. Nobody knew anything about mold toxicity at that point. So there's somehow I should have been taught something where the information didn't even exist, or it's not valid. I would try to make people realize how fuzzy their thinking was to be able to come at it from that perspective. But the bottom line is really simpler than that. A lot of people don't want to learn new information, and they're hoping it's not valid. And I'll keep putting it at arm's length until the universe tells me, this is important. Get on the stick. Start learning about it, because you've got a lot of patients who are experiencing this now.
I love this. Okay, so shifting gears, I think anyone who's listening, we know you have your book on mold, book called Toxic, which really, that was a game changer for me in my practice. It really elevated the understanding of the toxic burden, and it took my personal practice to the next level where I started looking at other sources of information. Amazing. Thank you so much for putting that together. But your newest book that's coming out, right? It didn't come out yet?
It's out.
It's out, the sensitive patient?
Yeah, that's been out since May.
Since May. Okay. So the newest book about the sensitive patient really brings to light something that not many providers, even in this crazy universe, are aware of. So we're like, yes, we have this chronic Lyme or we have this mold, but we tend to get these really super sensitive patients. They're sensitive to everything. They can't go into stores. They can't have candles on. Why is this happening? Why is it happening that the patients with mold are like, why are we seeing such sensitivity in our patients?
So these are very interrelated subjects. So any of us in the medical field who work with mold toxicity or Lyme disease are seeing sensitive patients. The reason for that is that the sensitivity that they are developing is triggered by the inflammation that mold and Lyme produces. And for many years, I've been a champion of the sensitive patient because most of them have been dismissed by their physicians, and it's in your head, or you just need to tough up. And I know and knew that's not true. These are perfectly wonderful human beings whose nervous systems can't handle the world that they're living in. And it's not any fault of theirs. It's because their nervous systems have been slowly and inexorably sensitized by some of the illnesses that we're treating. I put together over 20 guest authors. I didn't really want this to be my book. I wanted it to be our book so that patients could understand that we have learned a tremendous amount in the last 20 years about the sensitization process, how it happens, better yet, how to treat it. So you don't have to be by yourself, abandoned by family and friends. We can fix this if you understand the trigger and you understand the physiology of what's creating that sensitization.
So just for my general audience here, we're talking about the body that's so overburdened and overwhelmed that it now is reacting to the wrong things.
Think senses. Our senses of smell, taste, touch, or hearing. Sensitization means our senses have become hyperreactive, hypermobilized. It can occur to all of the senses globally, or it could just be one or two. It could be increased sensitivity to light, sound, touch, food, smell, chemicals, and more recently, EMFs, or electromagnetic frequencies. Any area in here that you have become sensitive to is very real, and we know how to treat it. A lot of people think this is rare. Okay, just a couple of handfuls of people in this world. They did a study in Britain a few years ago in which it was determined that 1% of the population was so disabled that they were on disability.
Wow.
1%. And 35% of the population had become sensitive in a number of different areas to the point that it was affecting their lives. So we're not talking, this is rare, you'll never meet anybody who's become sensitive to this. This has become global.
And that's the people who are coming in to complain about it? How many people have just decided like, oh yeah, I'm just really sensitive to perfume. I just don't wear it, or I just can't go into they just assume that's their normal and never even consider to bring it up. But
And people don't realize they're taking a risk, because neurologically, the process of sensitization is something that keeps snowballing if you're not treating what's triggering it in the first place. So it might start with, I'm a little sensitive to light. I need to wear sunglasses more and more often when I go outside, or gosh, that music is too loud for me. I just can't handle it. If you blow it off, there's a very strong risk that whatever is triggering that, could be mold toxicity, Lyme, any number of other conditions. If it isn't treated, your nervous system will get increasingly sensitive to the point that it will become disabling after a while.
This is a really important point. It's like when I tell my patients, brain fog is not normal. We don't accept brain fog. Or this afternoon, I'm just tired after my lunch, right? This is the beginning. Brain fog is the beginning. This is down the road. It can lead to dementia, right? There's a spectrum of things.
Yes.
So this subtle sensitivity, anyone out here listening to this podcast who is like super sensitive, it's a red flag. It's a red flag. That's not okay. You shouldn't just be like, oh, I'm just really sensitive to these things. It's not okay. It will progress because you're not removing the trigger. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this underlying inflammation, when you're saying neurological, not just your central nervous system, but it can be the cause of some of the neurodegenerative disease.
Yes, it can.
Right? Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, all of it.
Yeah, all neurodegenerative disease is essentially an inflammatory process. If you don't look for the source of that inflammation, it will keep building on itself until it gets to the point that your life is severely impacted by it. Alzheimer's, the wonderful work of Dale Bredesen. Dale recognized that there were 36 specific things we could measure that gave us information about inflammation in the body. And if we treated it, you could get better. And so if medicine had embraced that, I do not understand why it has not. Dale, who I love, gets grief, even though he has dozens of published papers documenting this. Other neurologists say, I just don't believe it.
I know. It's crazy.
It's not like the tooth fairy. It's like we have medical evidence of that. Ignore it if you will, but why tell patients who have no hope that you have no hope, go home and degenerate, as opposed to, hey, we can maybe fix this and you could live an almost normal life and a healthier life and your whole family would be happier. And why not go the positive route?
He was on my podcast and he said, I challenge any neurologist, let them bring everyone in the room that they've helped reverse Alzheimer's, and I'll bring all the people that I've helped reverse Alzheimer's, and let's see. And he said, they're not going to bring anyone to the room. It's just, I have no idea why this is hard for neurologists to accept. It's baffling.
So again, the public doesn't know a lot of this because this too, it's new information. It has not been embraced by the medical community. And we have that lag time before medicine not only embraces it and says, I invented it, by the way.
And here's a pill for it.
Yeah.
Here's a pill.
So the people who do the groundbreaking work rarely get appreciated for their groundbreaking work. Mostly they just have to bear the slings and arrows of...
Call us charlatan and all the other things.
I've been called, as I said, I was called worse during my life.
So I've embraced it. So you said that there are these triggers that cause this. So we're talking about toxins. We mentioned Lyme, we mentioned mold. Is there anything else we should consider?
Well, there are other infections, although in my experience, mold and Lyme are the two biggies. There's other kinds of infections that can do it. There are chlamydial infections. There's mycoplasma infections. There's a variety of viral infections. EMFs can trigger it in people who are getting increasingly sensitive. So there are hundreds of thousands of chemicals in our environment that can and are doing it that we can't even measure yet. Mold just happens to be one that we have studied the most and can measure the most easily. So we We live in an incredibly toxic world. Sorry, guys, that's just how it
It's
is.
just, it is.
Our leaders have turned a blind eye to it, which is, oh, we'll do another 20-year study and get this figured out. There are 350,000 new chemicals in our environment that did not exist 70 years ago. 500 have been studied for their toxicity effects. We have literally polluted the world that we lived in with no respect to the fact that, well, we are a very sensitive biochemical system in here, and you're going to throw stuff at it and expect it'll do nothing?
Yeah.
Very naive.
It's very naive. And I think people also don't understand when they say detoxification, it's not drinking water with lemon juice. Detoxifying is a complex process. And
it is, and we need help. The illnesses which we've mentioned, which are inflammatory in nature, are all exploding. They're all become epidemic in our environment. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, autism, exploding, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, Lyme disease, mold toxicity. What do they all have in common? They are inflammatory processes, and our environment plays a very large role in that. That's what I'm talking about. I understand. It's scary information. Nobody wants to hear this. No one wants to invite me to a dinner party and get me going. That's not anything you want to hear. But putting our head in the sand, I hope magically this goes away someday, while we're still adding chemicals that are not being checked into the environment, is crazy behavior, absolute crazy behavior.
You're saying that no one wants to hear this from you, but I'm sure our patients want to hear this because it's the ultimate validation to hear someone from the medical field validating what they're picking up almost anecdotally from smaller communities of fellow sufferers. And then to have someone validate them and say, no, this is real and you're not crazy. I think they would all invite you to dinner. All of them would say, tell us more. Tell us that we're not crazy. Because I'm sure you feel this as well. Sometimes in my initial consultation, it's just this moment when they're heard and they're not dismissed and they're not said, no, to take his Xanax. Like, to really be heard, I think that's half of the, I don't know about half, but a significant part of the therapeutic process.
It's estimated that there are 10 million patients at this minute in America suffering with some degree of mold toxicity. And the number of those who have any awareness of that is minuscule. So we have a lot of work to do to help educate the public, our colleagues, about what we've learned. Even if people call me a quack or say there's no science behind what you do,
right.
Okay, whatever. I've only helped over 4,000 people with mold toxicity. That doesn't mean I'm an expert, although everyone thinks it does. It means I have some experience that I can bring to the table to help people get better. Now, you can deny the experience or ignore it, but it wouldn't change anything. All of these are patients you're describing who were told it's in your head, you don't have anything real, take an antidepressant and go away. All of these patients have gotten completely well by treating this non-existent condition called mold toxicity.
It doesn't, yeah. It doesn't exist. We just fixed it. Could you tell our audience in very broad strokes, because I know this is actually much more technical, how do we treat mold?
Oh, what?
How do we treat mold?
Well, there are three main components to treating mold. First, the hardest part, most expensive part, is measuring it in the home or work and being sure that you're not being ongoing exposed. You can't get well if you're getting exposed to mold. Just sorry, obvious, but it's a scary part. It's expensive. No one wants to deal with it. But the bottom line is that has to be discussed at the first visit. The second parts of treatment and the third are taking the correct binders for what mold toxins we know are in your body. And the third is most of our patients have colonized, meaning After being exposed for a period of time, mold has started growing in your gut and sinus areas so that you could move from a moldy environment to a pristine environment, but your body is still making mold toxin because it's in you. So ultimately, we then need to treat with antifungals so that we can get the mold and candida out of the sinuses and out of the gut. So that's a simplistic way of doing it. We have a very accurate, very simple test to check for mold toxicity. You simply collect the urine specimen first thing in the morning. Not complicated. We can do it a little more elaborately to be more accurate. But the bottom line is collect the urine specimen, mail it off, and get it checked out. There are a number of labs in the country doing it. My bias is that Real Time is the laboratory that gives us the most accurate, consistent results. I don't always get the same accurate or consistent results from other labs. Now, if you're on Medicare, that test is completely covered by Medicare. Dysfunction free. It's a doable, simple test. If you get mold coming out of your urine, it's in your body. It's not complicated.
And then you have to treat it. The treatment sometimes is a bit complicated. For those out there, you definitely want to find a guide to help you.
The treatment is complicated. It is doable, and it requires stick-to-itiveness and just hanging in there. It's not a quick fix.
No.
Mold does not depart the body just because you realize it's there and go, be gone. It doesn't work that way. As a general rule, if it's there, it's very happy in you. You're providing mold and candida with wonderful nutrients where it's marked, dark, moist, temperature is perfect. It's not going to leave unless you make it leave. It does take work, but I want to be sure I leave the message that once diagnosed, it is treatable. The vast majority of people that I've worked with had completely recovered their health, even though mold toxicity can really take your life out from under you. It can be a very devastating illness. It's not a simple process, but it's treatable. So
that's such a great hopeful message. I want to touch on one last point, which is we discussed that people who have some sort of inflammation going on or infection, they are very sensitive. They're sensitive to all these things. I want to touch on something called mast cell activation. Can you explain to our mutual audience what it is?
I want to expand this discussion to include mast cell activation, vagal dysfunction, and limbic dysfunction, because all three are intimately physiologically connected to each other. So the underlying physiology of sensitization involves the limbic system, which is a part of the brain, becoming hypervigilant because it is trying to protect you by alerting you to the fact that you are doing something that it thinks is not in your best interest. When the limbic system gives you symptoms, it'll be in two different categories. One in the category of sensitizations. So if you've become sensitive to anything, light, sound, touch, food, chemicals, EMFs, that's limbic. The other piece of that is the limbic system regulates emotion. So if you've become anxious, moody, depressed, OCD, if you didn't have it before and it's new, if you had it before and it's worse, that's limbic. So the limbic system is a part of this process. Working hand in hand with the limbic system is what's called the vagal nerve system, which includes the vagus nerve, which is a cranial nerve, and other cranial nerves that are directly connected to it. The vagus nerve works with the limbic system to protect you by scrutinizing your environment for safety. The symptoms it gives are different. So the vagus nerve controls intestinal motility. So any symptom that you have that involves constipation, reflux, gas, bloating, abdominal discomfort, or pain probably has a limbic piece to it. The limbic system controls the autonomic nervous system. So if people get palpitations, POTS, temperature dysregulation. Those are ways in which your vagus is saying, we have a problem. And then, to answer your question, we have mast cell activation. Mast cells are a particular immune system that are a bridge between the immune system and the nervous system. They line, particularly every tissue in the body has them, but they're especially prevalent in the sinus, throat, gut area, so that if they become, we use the word activated, if they become activated, they become hypersensitive to stimulation, so that any food that you eat, it's not food allergy, any food that you eat, if it comes down the GI tract at a time that you are activated, you will react to it with things like flushing, palpitations, abdominal symptoms, diarrhea, hives, itching. Those are some of the common ones, but there's many others. So if you get any symptoms immediately after eating, it doesn't have to be consistent, then we also have mast cell activation as this trifecta of sensitivity.
Okay, that's a lot. And I'm going to break it down if that's okay. Just tell me. I like to re-say it for the audience if that's okay with you. Just
go for it.
In broad strokes. So we start off with some sort of toxin, which could be environmental or bacterial. I know you mentioned chlamydia or viral. Would you include H. pylori in that as well?
I don't think it's as big a player as some people do. I have some colleagues who think that H. pylori make a big difference.
Yeah.
That it can cause ulcers or gastrointestinal issues, absolutely yes. But I don't see it as a sensitizer.
I know maybe not sensitive. I know for Dale Redson, there is a linkage there for Alzheimer's as well. I know he wants that eradicated. But nevertheless, we have these toxins or bacteria, which cause some sort of inflammatory process. And as long as we do not manage or discover what this trigger is, this inflammatory process keeps going and going. Initially, it'll be sensitive and you'll live with it. And then eventually, these three key systems can get activated. The limbic, the vagal system, and mast cells can be activated. And then you have all these crazy symptoms that the patients have. I have palpitation, I have POTS, I'm hot, I'm cold, I'm anxious. I've had patients who left their careers because they thought they were just suddenly anxious and nothing touched it. So all these symptoms that kind of seem so different in different patients, seem erratic, and it seems like how could all of these people with all these different symptoms possibly have the same trigger? But this really explains it, because this trigger is just activating different systems. And so they might be food sensitive, they might be emotionally sensitive, they might be sense sensitive, but it's all happening from the same trigger. So if you're experiencing this, first, you're not crazy. That's really important. And second is about finding this trigger and eradicating it. And your contention is that if you're that unwell, mold should be really top of your list of what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm. Very much. Mold and Lyme are the two most common triggers. My experience, mold is the most common trigger for it. So again, it's not a hard thing to diagnose. You just need to know which lab to use and do it.
Yeah. Would you include tinnitus in there as well?
Would I include
tinnitus, however you want to pronounce it, as part of the sensitivity?
That's a difficult question. A large percentage of our patients with Lyme and mold either get tinnitus or it becomes worse. When we cure whatever is triggering it, the tinnitus may improve. But it's one of those really tricky things that once the nervous system has developed tinnitus, you can't always turn it off as quickly as it got turned on.
Yeah, interesting. That's an interesting one. Oh my God, this is so powerful. What do you want to tell our shared audience that maybe I forgot to ask you?
I think I'm telling you what I hope you can know, which is that if you feel ill and you're not getting a diagnosis, then let's dig into where that's coming from. If you have become sensitized then we can start looking for the causes of that sensitization. So those who are interested, my new book, The Sensitive Patient's Healing Guide, I think would be very helpful. And for others, my earlier book, which you referred to, called Toxic, goes over all of this in a lot more detail so people can begin to understand I'm not crazy. I have symptoms that directly reflect something causing it, and we can make that diagnosis and we can cure it.
Exactly right. And don't get frustrated when your provider thinks you're crazy. That's okay.
Well, not a lot of providers know what we're talking about. My comment, this has come up very often. People will say, oh, my provider is such a lovely person. I love being with them. Great. Have they diagnosed you? Do they know what's wrong with you? No, but I really like them. I think that's great.
Great.
If your car wasn't working and you took it into the garage 3 times and they kept saying, oh, I'm sorry it's not working, but I don't know what's wrong with it, you probably would go somewhere else.
Oh, yeah, I like that one.
So my comment would be, if you're not getting answers, no matter how lovely that being is, find someone who has answers for you. Hanging out with nice people is great, but you really want answers.
I agree. And conversely, if I have patients, maybe you do as well, who don't want to see their doctor at all because they don't believe in, to that I say, you use them like your plumber or your electrician. You don't have to love them, but there's certain services they provide. They could do blood tests. They can make sure we don't have other pathologies. They can prescribe medication. So go in there with lower expectations and just use them for the services that they can provide. And then get other guides to help you with some of these more complex situations. But I like having them on the team because there are certain things we're going to need from them, and just take the emotions out of it. So it's the flip side of what you're experiencing. I am so thankful for your time. This has been, I know maybe it doesn't show, but I can't tell you how excited I am that you're here on our show. And I know that our audience is going to love this so much. And I'm grateful for all that you do for humanity.
You're welcome.